Turn in Matthew, the New Testament, chapter 2. We're going to receive some visitors from the east. Matthew chapter 2, and I'll read to you from the New Living Translation, starting with verse 1. Now Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from the eastern lands, arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it arose." And most translations say in the east. "And we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem of Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet said." This is in Micah 5. If you want to turn there, you can, but I'm not going to read from there exactly. "And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." So this is a fulfillment of the Old Testament. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." Well, after this interview, the wise men went on their way, and the star that they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. Okay, well that's the story. And what I'd like to do for you guys is kind of flesh this out for you, and then try to bring this story to where we are today, where we live today. As in those days, it is like right now. We have two camps in this story, and we have two camps in this church and in this country and everywhere, and I've been a part of both of them from time to time. We have the wise men, and we have the dull men. Wise and dull, right? You ever pick up an old hatchet that has no blade on it and try to cut down something with it? It's not too sharp. It's like using a club to try to cut a branch down or cut a tree down. That's what dull means. It's not sharp. Maybe it was at one time, but it's lost its edge and it is currently dull. Right? And I'll explain that as we go on. So, the name of this message will be Wise Men versus Dull Men. All right, we'll see which camp you are in this morning. I'll tell you which camp I'm in if we get to that. So, Barb, could you stand up? All right, if you're sitting here in the church, which you are, and you look over to this way, over towards Barb, that is east, right? So just look at Barb and pretend that is Persia. All right? Barb is currently Persia, and Barb is where the wise men lived during this story. So stay standing for a second. As she's looking to the west was Israel, and in Israel was a city called Jerusalem. Dorothy, do you mind standing up? Dorothy is kind of west of Persia, which is Barb. Dorothy, you are Jerusalem. Congratulations. Have you ever been to Jerusalem before?
No.
It's a special day for you. All right? Well, Jerusalem's a great city, a pretty city, but we're not going to focus so much on Jerusalem. I'm going to ask you to stand up. You're going to be Bethlehem. Carlene is now Bethlehem. Have you ever been called Bethlehem?
No.
We'll just call you Beth for short. So, we have wise men in the east. And they followed this guy named Daniel, who used to live in Persia, and he was the chief over the magicians and the wise men and the astrologers and astronomers. And he was having visions, and he was hearing from God, and he passed these things on. Now these guys were wise, and they studied stuff, and they were getting excited because they knew time was coming, from what Daniel said, that a king was going to be born, and they were all excited. So in the east, where Barb is, she saw the makings of a star, and she got all excited. You can sit down now. And so, naturally, the Jews are going to have a big party, and they're going to be all excited because their king, the one that Daniel prophesied about, is going to come. So they go to the capital. They'd never heard of Bethlehem. They go to the capital. They heard of Dorothy. So they mount their camels, and whether there was 3 wise men, there was more than one, because they were called wise men, plural. There might have been 100, there might have been 3. But we're not actually given a number. They pack up all their stuff and gifts and everything, and in their excitement, these wise men go to Dorothy, Jerusalem. You can sit down now. And when they get to Dorothy, people aren't excited. People don't even understand why they're there. And when they find out about this king coming, they had to go dust off the old books to figure out what they were talking about. Right? So they weren't all excited about it. So once they dusted off the old book, they sent these wise men to Carlene here, Bethlehem. You can sit down now. And they found the house where the child was and the mother, and they got all excited, they had a party, and they gave gifts. Now you've heard this story a long time, but have you ever seen it in a geographical spectrum before? In this living geographical spectrum, because I can't afford a map up here. So, does that make a little more sense of what we're talking about? This star that they saw, that they followed, I've heard a lot of people try to explain it away. This constellation, this one, and it formed a tail, and this one, and this gas giant exploded for just a short time. And you know what? Honestly, I'm not satisfied with any of these explanations that I've heard. I can't explain it to you, and I'm not even going to try. But I will tell you this. It was intentional. It was a miracle. It worked. And I give God all the credit for it. And that's where I'm just going to rest with that. How can God use an astrologer? We know that's a bad thing. We know that that's not godly. You know, astrology is its own religion. They look to the stars to guide their lives, and they look to the stars religiously and expect stuff and predict stuff, and they're not always right. So, how can God use people who ain't all there to know more than the people who are sitting on the treasure? People who have the books, have the prophecies, have the roadmap right in their possession, and it's just gathering dust. They're not excited about it. They're not reading it. They were dull. One, they didn't have all the religious stuff right, but they were wise in that they expected the king. So they were called wise men, learned men, people who studied the book of Daniel. And the people who had all the goods, people who had all the tradition, who had the right religion, who had the right relationship, were dull. They lost their edge. They weren't even expecting a king. They were too busy worrying about their own situation. They weren't looking to the stars. They were just kind of navel gazers. Kind of like, you know how the chickens are always pecking at the ground for stuff. Sometimes they'll eat a rock, sometimes they'll eat a seed. Either one works if you're a chicken. Sometimes religious people or Christian people or Jewish people for that matter, they're eating rocks and they're like looking down at the ground. They're not looking up. You know, I was here last week and I saw a bald eagle. And I'm always thrilled when I see one. They are so beautiful. Have you guys seen them around here? There's a nest in Elport. I've actually seen their nest. I don't know how often the young are born and fly out of there. But the mom always stays close to that nest. And dad flies around, he hunts the conchiquinescent and gets fish for them. And I think that's just awesome. So when I'm standing there in the back of the church here, this would be south. Actually, from where Barb's Persia is, it's kind of south. The burn barrel's down that way. I see this eagle just gliding by. It's always surprising, and he never makes a sound. And if I was looking down at the burn barrel, I'd have never noticed them. But every once in a while, it's good to look up because you just never know what you're going to see. And those eagles, they're so big. That's the first thing that strikes me. It's like huge. And if they fly over you and you see that shadow go over you, man, you wonder why they just don't swoop down and pick you up and take you to the nest and feed you their young. I mean, they're awesome birds. But you got to look up to see them because they are silent. They just kind of glide around. They're not flapping around and like the chickens are on the ground, flapping and making a bunch of noise and eating a bunch of rocks. They're up there with their eagle eyes just kind of soaring silently, doing what they got to do, being cool, being bald eagles. I think that's what I like about them the most. They're beautiful and they're bald. So it's just a personal thing. But getting back to our story. What was the situation? Okay, now you have the lay of the land, right? The Jews were in captivity in Babylon for a long time. And Daniel was pretty much, he was a teenager when he got there, but he lived to a ripe old age in Babylon. And he knew the time was coming when Jerusalem was going to get back together. It was the 70 years were up, and they were going to return to their land. And he was all excited about it. He was praying and fasting. And the book of Daniel tells us he ate no pleasant bread. He went on what was called a Daniel fast. You ever heard of that before? And he was seeking the Lord. And the Lord sent him an angel and said, Daniel, God just loves you. And the first day you started to pray, he sent me here to talk to you, but we had to contend with the prince of Persia and fight these people. But I'm here from the first day you called on me, and I'm here to tell you what's going to go on. And he lays out history like nobody has ever laid out history before. You want to read the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, it is amazing. Read it with a prayer guide and a study guide and a few historical guides if you really want to get something out of it. But he had a pretty good handle on when the Messiah was coming. And the people that he was around, that he rubbed elbows with in Babylon and in Persia, where Barb's standing, they remembered what he said, they wrote it down, and they were excited about it. And they were interested, and they studied, and their heads were up, and they were looking. They were more likely to see an eagle fly by, because they were looking up, right? And they were excited when they saw the constellation or whatever it came together. They saw it while they were in the east. And they followed the whole progression until it landed up in Carleen here. Bethlehem. And they were excited about the whole deal. And that's very, very awesome. Whereas the people who had returned to their land, who lived, their ancestors lived through the Babylonian captivity, they were worried about what's this year's crop's going to be. Oh, these Romans, they're taking us over now. Oh, that's a problem. Politics. Oh, the school board's acting up. Oh, our kids, sometimes they're rebellious, sometimes they behave. Oh, they're worried about life. They're all concerned about what's on the ground in front of them. They're not looking up. They're dull. Spiritually, they're very dull. They're not acting like wise men, are they? Right? Pretend you're at home one day and you're not dressed up or anything. You're in your pajamas, or you've got a robe on, or you're walking around in your sweats, whatever your casual home attire is. And you hear a knock on your door. Right? And who could that be? So you open up the door and there's this foreign guy standing on your porch at your front door, and he's like, hello, I'm so excited to be here with you. Today's the day. This is awesome. And you're like, what? And then you don't want to be rude, so you invite the guy in. He's going on and on about this special thing that was supposed to happen at your house today, and you're just like clueless. You know what I mean? This is kind of what the Jews felt like. Here comes these people from the land of Barb to our town, to our capital city, the land of Dorothy, and they're all excited about something, and we don't even know what they're talking about. Do you see the irony in that? Do you see how that can happen in our lives? We, as Christians, have been given a great blessing. 66 books worth, right? All kinds of information about the past, present, future. We've learned the beginning, middle, and end of every story. And in the beginning, middle, end of all this written in here is our story. And we fail to get excited about that. We fail to remind ourselves to remember. We fail to look into it. And we get dull. And pretty soon we're eating the stones and we're like the chickens just groveling on the ground. And we're not looking up. And we're so into our discomfort. We're so into our, oh, this isn't happening. This person isn't behaving. This isn't working. We get so caught up in all of that we get dull. And then someone who's in tune with God, someone who is looking up, comes into our life, and we don't know what they're talking about. Or we don't get it. Or we don't share their joy or their excitement. This is what is happening in Jerusalem at this time, and that kind of stuff happens now. Don't answer me, but ask yourself this question. How excited am I about God? Scale of 1 to 10? Not very, kind of, used to be, or yes, very excited about God. Because my motto is this world is not my home. I'm only passing through. This world, it's only a hotel room, a stop on my way to glory, to the kingdom that God has provided to me. I read about it. Matter of fact, I just was reading about it the other day. And God just tells me, well, Jesus told me, he says, I'm coming to prepare a place for you. And I'm coming back, and I'm going to take you to myself. And it's going to be awesome. We'll be together forever. We'll never be separated again. It's awesome. And my spirit I give to you. He will preserve you in this life. He will tell you things to come. He will comfort you. He will convict you of sins. So you'll never be alone, never be without purpose. You have my word. You have my spirit. And when you guys gather together in my name, remember me. Take the bread, take the wine, and do this as often as you do. And remember me, how much I love you, how much I gave for you. You do this, and you'll be encouraged, and you'll be sharp, and you won't get dull. But we still manage to get dull, don't we? We get so concentrated on our problems, on the world's problems, on our kids' problems, on our neighbors' problems, the nation. We can get so down and so dull. Hear that, YouTube? Happens to everybody. It even happens to me. You get overwhelmed by the ground before you. So let me get back to the Bible here while you're wincing from that wound I just gave you. So Jesus is born in Bethlehem, it says in Matthew 2, verse 1. Right? That's our starting point. Jesus is born. And nobody was really excited about it. Nobody was really in tune with it. Nobody even realized, most people didn't even realize it was going on, except for a few shepherds, who we'll talk about at another time. Today is Wise Men Day, the land of Barb. So, Herod is their king at this time. And Herod, nobody likes this guy. Herod is a louse, right? He is so mean, and the Romans have said, okay, you be the governor over this entire area, and we won't bother you. Do what you got to do, but collect the taxes for us, and maintain law and order, and we won't bother you. And Herod says, no problem. I will maintain law and order. I'll do it through cruelty if I have to, but I'll get her done for you. So don't you worry. So Herod was cruel, and he was, from what I understand his story, he was very paranoid. It is said that he killed his wife, and he killed a couple of his sons because he was afraid they were going to try to take his kingdom from him. He was jealous, envious, paranoid, whatever you want to call it. And the Jews had a saying about Herod that it was safer to be his pig than his son. Because Herod converted to Jerusalem, to Judaism, just to kind of like be a puppet king for them, but he really wasn't a good Jew. And a good Jew, we knew that they didn't eat pork, or they wouldn't eat a pig. So it was safer to be Herod's pig than it was to be his own son. That's not impressive to you. Well, I was impressed when I heard it. Anyway, Herod was a louse who did not eat pork. Moving on. The wise men show up in Jerusalem. Right? Just like the neighbor or the foreigner showing up at your door. And they knock on the door, they come to Jerusalem like, okay, we're here, where's the party? Aren't you guys excited? Your king's born, we've heard about it. And Herod's like, whoa, slow down, guys. What are you talking about? I'm Herod, I'm the king. And he didn't want to seem uncool, so Herod kind of plays along with him. Yeah, that's good. Can you give me a little info here, because I'm a little light on info? meanwhile, he said to the priest, guys, go get the dust off the books and tell me what this is all about. Tell me where it's going to be born. So he's talking to these wise men, this paranoid Herod, non-pig eater. He's talking to them. He's like, okay, well, how long has it been since you've seen this star? And what are you seeing? What's your version of this story? And it turns out, from what I read and from what I've studied, that it was around a 2-year period. Now, this really messes with people's manger scene. It messes with their nativity scene, whatever you want to call it. Because what we see in most nativity scenes, there's baby Jesus laid in a manger with a gold plate behind his head. There's Mary and Joseph, and for some reason they have the gold plates behind their head. And above them there's a pretty angel with the luminescent wings what do they call that? You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and then there's the sheep, and then there's the donkey and the camels all kneeling, and then there's the shepherds and their sheep and they're kneeling, and then the wise men are just on the other side with frankincense, gold, and myrrh, and we see the whole scene like, wow, that's cool. Well, it actually never happened like that, according to every Jewish historian that I've ever read. Have you ever heard about this stuff? It may have been 2 years after the birth before the wise men actually got there. It may have been around that period of time. So, can you imagine this? Jesus was a toddler by the time the wise men found him. And they were still hanging out in Bethlehem for a while. So that's pretty cool. But that really messes with your nativity, messes with your manger scene. Sorry. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to fool with your religion there. So they come there, and Herod's like, okay, I got to get a plan together. All right, when you guys worship him, could you please tell me where the young man is so I can go and worship him too? The pig's eye, he wasn't going to worship him. You know how he felt about pigs anyway. So he was going to go kill the kid, eliminate his rival, just like his wife and his other sons that he had eliminated. So nobody's going to compete with me. So the wise men go down there, they celebrate, they give gold, incense, frankincense, and myrrh, 3 very precious gifts. You can study a little bit more on your own about those 2 things. Very valuable, things you could trade, things that kept Mary and Joseph fluid, liquid, so that they could go do business, so they could move around and do what they had to do and get established. And so they were warned in a dream, the wise men. God spoke to wise men who were probably astrologers, who did not have their religion together too much, but they were excited about the king, so God showed them grace. Even though they didn't have all their religious ducks in a row, he still told these guys, look, you better just stay away from Herod, he's bad news. So they took another route. They went from Carlene here, around the altar here, and then they went back to Barb, to where Herod was living in Jerusalem, where Dorothy is. So they left, and then Herod was furious. So he said, well, I've got to eliminate the competition. So this bloodthirsty Nazi mentality kicked in, and he went and he killed every male child, this is terrible, who lived in that Bethlehem area up to 2 years old. He thought he would hedge his bets. So from the time the star appeared, roughly around 2-year period, just play it safe, and he attacked and killed all those poor babies. And that is an awful, awful, terrible part of history. And this world can be brutal. This world can be as unfair and unjust as you can imagine. Like, why was there a Holocaust? Why was there a Hitler or a Mussolini? Why was there a Soviet Union where millions of people got killed? And why all these tragedies? Why all these things? You know what? I don't know exactly why. I kind of think it's about sin. It's about the stupidity of man. But I know one thing, no matter what terrible thing in history was going on, God was in the midst blessing. God was in the midst doing good. God's plans were never slowed down. They were always working. And in the midst of all this all these terrible things that were going on, the Savior was born. And he was about to rise up, and he was about to save this dark, dying, stupid, sinful world full of chickens, these dull men who didn't even know their own king was there. He was about to save them all. In spite of our sin, in spite of our dullness and everything else, God was at work. He was at work then, and he's at work right now. As dark and as dingy and as unfair and unjust and crazy and anything else you want to throw at this world, all true. In spite of all that, God is alive. God is moving. God is doing something. Now, just as a side note, if you ask me, I'll give you my opinion of what's going on in America right now. And it's kind of what I've said before. But do you guys have a rug in front of your front door? It's kind of like where people have got to stand before they come into your house. I think God has taken America's rug to the church, and He is currently shaking it. That's what God is doing in America, in my opinion. What's loose and what's not connected, what's refuse, what's dirt, is going to fly off. What's true, holy, what's hanging on is going to remain. Why are churches small these days? Some people are hanging on. The fakers, the people who were never that impressed, the people who were never that invested, they've been shaken off. Judgment is going to start on the house of God. And once we're shored up and God has dealt with us, then judgment begins on planet Earth. And after the judgment on planet Earth is done, then comes the millennial reign of Christ. If you're asking me where are we at in history, we're currently at the rug-shaking version. Peter told us that judgment starts in the house of God. Are you real? Are you a faker? Like the parable that Jesus told about the sower who sows the word. Some lands on the road, some lands among thorns, but some landed on good soil. The best I can figure that parable is, in 1980, May 4th, I was ready, man. I was tired of hearing all the stuff. I was tired of failing. I was tired of being afraid. And I said, Jesus, come into my life. My heart had been kicked around. It had been plowed up. But my heart was ready when Jesus came. Now, I haven't always been perfect since that day, but my heart was right. And no matter what comes in this world, I promise you this, I'm going to tie a rope and hang on. Even when I don't understand what's happening. I don't want to be a dull man. I want to be a wise man. I don't want to be surprised by a knock on the door by somebody who's excited about something my Savior's doing, and I know nothing about it. I don't want to be dull. I want to be sharp. Haven't always succeeded, but I'm looking to get better. And I'm encouraging you all to get better. Get in tune with God. Get in tune with His Word. Listen to His Spirit. Learn how to pray. Learn how to fellowship. Get sharp. Don't get shaken off. Hang on. Whether you're sick, whether you're depressed, whether you're confused, whether you're laid off, whatever situation you find you're in, I'm sorry for that. But in spite of that, in spite of Herod being the unrighteous Nazi, whoever he was, being king, in spite of that, God was working something. Be in tune with that. Get on board with that. Get involved in His gospel message. Because the time is coming when people just ain't going to listen. Or they're not going to hear. Jeremiah's day, in the book of Jeremiah, I don't think he ever wanted a convert. He warned them for 30 years-ish, I think, and till Babylon came and carried them all away. Jeremiah got to walk away from that, but nobody else. So here's the message. Are you a wise man? Are you excited about what God's doing in spite of the madness? Or are you a dull man who lost your edge, who can't look up above the trouble that you live in, and that's where you live, and that's all there is. You haven't bothered to look up in so long you don't remember how. Now's the time to get that right. This Christmas season. Yeah, oh gosh, Tom, you know how many Christmases I've seen. Oh, Tom, you know how commercial it is. Oh, we're not allowed to say Merry Christmas anymore. Oh, just negative, negative, negative. Bark, 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 bark. That's what you sound like. Right? No. Let's look up. Let's get excited. I don't care if Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. This is when we celebrate it. You know what? In the midst of this dark, stupid, crazy, sinful world, God sent His only Son in a little stable in poverty, and He was born. And I'm going to celebrate that. Yeah, I'm going to do it with a Christmas tree. Yeah, I'm going to do it with Bing Crosby singing White Christmas. I don't care. And you tell me all day long not to say Merry Christmas. I'm still going to say Merry Christmas because I got breath in my lungs. I'll say it at the mall. I'll say it at school. I'll say it in the church. I'll say it on the government building. You can't stop me as long as I got a breath. That's how I'm going to roll. I want to be a wise man, not a dull man. Oh, we're not allowed to do this. We can't do it. You know what? Forget that. Don't get caught up in that mentality. Let's celebrate it for real. Let's celebrate it in style, like we come from the land of Barb. And let's just get excited about it. What do you say?
Amen.
One of the ways we could do that, something that this world does not get, we're going to take communion right now. This is not a failed experiment. We're not coming here to Jesus' funeral. Oh, what a great man. If he'd only lived a little longer, he might have been a success. What a tragedy, he died so young. No, he died because he was supposed to, and he rose again, and he ever lives. That's who we're celebrating when we take communion. We remember his pain, we remember his death, but that's not where we stay, because we're wise men, right?
Amen.
And wise men still seek him.